Again, good morning, everyone. My name's Dami. I'm on the financials team here at Arthur, and today I'm going to be taking you through our webinar based on the property owner remittance. Okay. So, quick run through of how this webinar is going to go. Just going to add our intro. I'm going to show you how you would set up your account in the way that someone doing property owner remittances should. The process by which you do the property owner remittance, so paying out the landlords. And also, once you've done the remittance, I'll take you through the property owner payments list. And in this area here, you can print the statements and send it in batch to your property owners. And then throughout the course of the webinar, I'll also mention a few preferences that you can change with the property owner remittance based on your setup. And finally, once we've gone through everything, there'll be a session for any questions you have, and I'll answer them. Okay. So, in terms of setting up your account, so property owner remittances, this is used by people that are third-party property managers or make payments to a landlord. So, in order to be able to do the remittances on Arthur, the first thing that you need to do is that for your tenants, a recurring charge has to be made, and the transaction type that you're going to use is going to be rent charge. And it's very important that you use this transaction type, because the other transaction type, direct rent, doesn't make those rent receipts, which we call tenancy receipts, for the landlord that you would be able to remit. So that's the first thing that we're going to go through. So you're going to make a recurring charge for your tenant. It's going to be the amount that they're paid, the amount that the tenant pays you, however frequently they pay. And the main thing with that is that the transaction type has to be rent charge. Okay. So another thing, recurring charge that we have to make is that we have to make the recurring charge for the management fee. So the management fee, this time, it's not going to be a recurring charge for the tenant. It's going to be a recurring charge for the property owner. And with the management fees, you can make the management fee at the different levels. So in Arthur, we do have a hierarchy going from property to unit to tenancy. And the good thing with the management fee is that you can add this at any level depending on how you want. So for example, if you have a HMO, for example, and you've got multiple units within that property, and across all the units, it's the same percentage that you charge for the property, for that whole property. Instead of creating a management fee unit by unit or tenancy by tenancy, you can just create one management fee at the property level, which will affect all the units within it. So that's one thing to note with the management fees. You can add them at the various levels, so property, unit, and tenancy, but the recurring charge for the tenant must always be added within the tenancy. That's the only place you can add the rent recurring charge. Okay. And with the management fees as well, there's also an option called at remittance when you're making the management fee recurring charge. And basically this option essentially means that the management fee is auto-calculated at the remittance screen based on what you would like to remit to the owner at any given time, whereas the normal standard option, a management fee would be generated however frequently you have set it up or based on every single time you receive rent, whereas at remittance just calculates a bulk sum, in simple words. Okay, so those are the two things that we're going to go through first. We're going to go through making the recurring charge for the rent and setting up your management fee. Okay, and then once we've done the management fee, once you've set up the recurring charges, you're receiving your rent, whether you're integrated with Zero, you'd be reconciling your rent there, or whether it's the case where you're going to be paying off the rent manually on Arthur. Either way, once you've got your rent paid off, you'll then be able to go through the process of actually paying out the money to the landlord, which is known as the property owner remittance in Arthur. So this remittance screen in Arthur can be found within the financials area, which I'm going to show you. And In terms of doing your remittance, you have a few options in terms of your setup and how you want to remit. So you may have a case where you've got a landlord that has multiple properties and you're going to remit all those properties together. In that case, your remittance type would be by entity, also known as property owner. If it's the case where, for example, you do have multiple properties for a specific owner and you pay the landlord property by property, then your remittance type would be property. And in the final case, if you've got a property that has, let's say, multiple units within that property, and you're going to literally be paying tenancy by tenancy, then your remittance type would be unit. So you can choose what remittance type you use based on your current agreement with your landlord. And just to note as well, remittances can be done individually. So you can go in and individually manually do a remittance, or if it's a case where you want to do it in a batch, you can also do multiple remittances for multiple landlords all at one go. Okay. And one last thing to note with the property owner remittance before I show you practically on Arthur is that you can also make one-off charges for the property owner at the remittance in the remittance area. So if it's a case where you've forgotten to add the transaction normally within the property or within the tenancy, and instead of going back, you can make a one-off charge to that property owner at the remittance stage, which I'll also show you. So that's the process of by which we're going to go through in terms of setting your account up and then doing your remittances. And then finally, I'm going to show you the property owner payments list, which is simply the area where you print your statements and you can send it to the landlord from Arthur. Okay, so let's go to Arthur. Okay, so you should be able to see my Arthur account. So currently I'm on the property screen. So starting off with the recurring charges and getting them sorted out, I'm going to go into one of the properties. So if I go into the property and I'm going to go into the tenancy that I have within that property. Okay, so within your tenancy, so in terms of adding the recurring charge for the rent, you can either do this when you're adding the tenancy. So when you're adding a tenancy, normally in Arthur, on the third screen, it will give you the option to make the recurring charge for the given tenant. Or however, if you choose not to do the recurring, set up your recurring charge, which is essentially your scheduled invoice, if you choose not to set that up when you're adding the tenancy, you can also add it afterwards within the tenancy like I'm doing here. So this is a tenancy that we have. And then within the tenancy, you would add the recurring charge within the recurring charge area. So here you can see that I've got two recurring charges set up. I've got one for the tenant, which is the normal rent invoice. And then I've got the management here, which is the property owner's charge. So in terms of how you add the recurring charge, simply add the recurring charge, fill in the details in terms of who the charge is for, what date that you want Arthur to basically be generating this invoices. So for example, if you wanted the first of the month or whichever date that you have in the tenancy agreement, you can choose to essentially have the recurring charge generate it however frequently you would like. So for example, say you wanted to use the first of the month, and then repeating, this is just the frequency at which you're going to, you want the charge to be generated. So we've got a range of frequencies here. And then if you have like a custom frequency, you can also set that up as well. So let's say this is just a monthly one. Okay, and for the period and this is literally just the time frame that the invoice is going to be relating to. So we are aware that some people charge in arrears, some people charge in advance. So for example, let's just say this is a charge in advance. So the time frame that the invoice is going to be relating to is for the month ahead. So we can have it. So if I select 1st of October, you can see that it automatically populates the end of the month, and the recurring charge would just keep going. So by the time it does for November as well, the November invoice will be relating to the month of November. So it will just keep going on a repeating basis like that. So once you've done the date and how often you want the charge to generate, most important thing, as I said, is to always use rent charge. So by default on Arthur, we have direct rent and we have rent charge, but rent charge is what you will always be using in order to do your remittances. So once you've selected the transaction type of rent charge, you fill in the rest of your details. So what do you want the description to be on your invoice, how much you want the invoice to be, however frequently you've set it up, and the amount. So those are the fields that you would just go ahead and fill in. And once you've done that, you would save your recurring charge. Okay. So I've already got one set up here. And then the second thing, so this is what you're going to do for all your tenancies. Again, you can either do this when you're adding the new tenancy, you can make the recurring charge there, or if you haven't done it, you can come into the tenancy like this and make the recurring charge for your tenant. So the second part is to make the management fee. So as I said, you can make the management fee at the tenancy level, the unit level, the property level. At all the levels within the hierarchy in Arthur, you can make the management fee. So here, I've made a management fee here at the tenancy level. So in whichever level you want to add the management fee, if you go into that level, so here I'm in the tenancy here, again, it's going to be a recurring charge that you're going to make, but this time it's a recurring charge for the property owner. It's a charge for the property owner. Okay, so you select who the charge is for. And just so you know, this recurring charge screen, it looks the same at all the levels. So when you're adding it at the property level or the unit level, this screen is going to be the exact same. Okay. So what you do is you choose who the charge is for. In this case, the management fees for the property owner. You then choose how you want your management fees to be set up. So I'm sure everyone has a different setup. So some people, it may be a fixed amount that you're charging. It may be a percentage that you're charging. So depending on your setup, you would choose which option is applicable to you. So let's say that we just use a percentage of rent received, which seems to be quite a common one. Okay, so once you've done a percentage of rent received, the transaction type that you're going to use is going to be a management fee charge. That's the transaction type. So for the rent, it was rent charge. For the management fee, it's just going to be the management fee charge. Again, you would put your description, whatever you want it to be seen as on the statement. And in the amount, you would put your percentage and whether VAT is applicable or not. Okay, and just to go back a bit, we also have this option here called at remittance. So I mentioned earlier that you have two options in terms of how you want your management fees to be generated. So at remittance means that it's not going to generate a single transaction line every time you receive rent, or if it's a fixed amount if your management fee is a fixed amount, it's not just going to generate like every month. What's going to happen is that it's going to calculate the bulk sum at the remittance based on what you have ticked to remit to the owner. So I'm going to show you the differences between ticking at remittance and not ticking at remittance when we go on to do our remittances. So in this example that I have here within the tenancy, I haven't ticked it to be at remittance. So I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so once you've got your recurring charges set up, then you're good to go. So based on however often your recurring charge is going to generate, on your statement, you will have the invoices basically generated. Okay, so in this case here, I've got one invoice here and it's generated for the 1st of October. So if you're integrated with Xero or QuickBooks, you'd be paying off those invoices in those respective systems. And if it's a case where you're not integrated, you would be paying off the charge within Arthur. So I'm just going to go ahead and pay off this one charge now. Okay. So once I pay off the charge, okay, add payment. Okay. So here you can see this invoice is no longer shown as overdue, and there's no longer an outstanding balance because I've paid it off. So even if you're integrated with Xero or QuickBooks, by the time you reconcile in those systems, it will bring a receipt just like this. So the statement would look the same in terms of receipt coming through, whether you're paying off on Arthur or whether you're going to be paying off in Xero and QuickBooks. It's just that the process by which you pay off slightly differs. Okay, so once you've paid off your rent charge, so right now I'm on the tenant statement. If I go to the property owner statement, okay, so I can see now, so that was an invoice of £1,000. I can see that a management fee charge has automatically created for me. So my management fee charge was set as 10%, and it's basically calculated the 10% of the rent that I received, and it's generated the management fee charge. So this is how it would look in the case that your management fee is not set to generate at the remittance. And then I've got another example that the management fee basically generates at the remittance screen. Okay. So in this case, I've paid off the rent. So now I can remit to the property owner. So you can only remit to the property owner if you have a tenancy receipt showing on their statement. If not, there would be nothing to remit. So this tenancy receipt for the property owner, it generates automatically as soon as you pay off any transaction type that of rent charge. So anytime you have a rent charge, once you pay it off, it's automatically going to create this tenancy receipt for the property owner. And if your management fee is, if you've created your management fee to not create at remittance, then it will automatically create another line for your management fee based on the rent that you've received or however you've set it up. Okay, so I hope that's clear. So now that I've got my tenancy receipt and I've got my management fee, I can go ahead and pay out the property owner. So in terms of where you do the remittance, this is located within financials. Okay, so within financials, towards the right here, there's an area just for property owner. So you've got the property owner remittance and the payments list that we'll go on to in a bit. So for your property owner remittance, we click on the screen, and here you would be able to see all your different properties, and the properties that show here would be any property with an outstanding balance, whether it's a negative or a positive. Just to note, if the payable to owner balance is a negative, it means that the property owner is actually owing you, and therefore you wouldn't be able to make a remittance with a negative amount, only for balances of 0 and positive amounts. Okay, so in that case, this was the property that we just dealt with, Clovefield Court. Okay, so now I can go ahead and make my remittance. So earlier when I mentioned that you have different remittance types, you can see your remittance types on this screen, on this left hand side column. So entity, again, I said that's for the case where you're essentially remitting by the whole portfolio for an owner. Property literally means you're remitting property by property, and unit means that you're literally remitting tenancy by tenancy. So you can change if it's a case where you've got different agreements with different landlords. So maybe for one landlord, you remit everything to him at once, and for another landlord, it's property by property. You can change this. And how you would change this quickly before I go into the remittance is that you simply go into the property owner's contacts. So you go into the contacts, and within the properties and units section, you can change the remit by. So in this case, if you wanted to start remitted by everything together for this entire portfolio, you would change this to property owner. So you can make changes depending on the agreement that you have with a property owner. Okay, so here we're just going to go ahead and remit this these transactions that we for the rent that we just paid off. So if I select transactions and remit, okay. So what I've got here is that you can see there's two management fees that have been set up here. So the reason why you're seeing two is this one here is this was made at either the unit or the property level. So this is the case where you've got a remittance management fee that is generated at remittance. And this one here is the case where you don't have the management fee to be created at remittance. It will literally generate every single time that you have a tenancy receipt. So I do advise people to use at remittance because it's literally just stuck here and it will just generate it will just calculate the management fee for you based on what you want to remit. So for example, if I was to untick the tenancy receipt here, you can see that the management fee here has the amount has gone to nil because there's nothing to remit. So it will just calculate it based on what you have ticked to remit. So in this case, we're not going to use this at remittance one because we've set one up without remittance in the tenancy. Okay, so you've got your management fee and your tenancy receipt, and then it then generates the amount that you're going to be paying to the owner. So the balance of the rent and minus the management fee will give you how much you're going to pay out to the owner. So I did also mention that you can add one-off property owner charges. So I know there are scenarios where you've paid for work and you're recharging the property owner, or you've just got a one-off charge for the property owner, maybe at the beginning of the tenancy or so. You can make those charges. So you can make those charges within the property or tenancy, or if you forget to make those one-off charges, you can add it here in the top right-hand corner. You've got an add transaction. Okay, so once you add transaction, you choose the transaction type you're using. So let's say, for example, we're just going to use a disbursement charge. Okay, so you can choose at what level you add it to. So if it's a property specific charge, so this is mainly useful in cases where you have multiple unit property. So if it was a case that the charge is for a specific unit, you can choose the unit here, but this is just a single unit property. And if it's a case that it was a charge relating to the entire property, all units included, you can choose, you would just choose to add it at the property level. So I'm just going to add it at the property level. Okay, choose the date, the description. I'm just going to call this a one-off charge. Okay, and however much your charge is, let's just say that's £50. Okay, and I can add that transaction. So automatically that's once I've done add, it's added it as a row within the remittance, and I can see that my remittance to the owner, the amount payable, has gone down by £50 because I've added a charge. And I think you've got up to a limit of 5 transactions, because ideally you don't need to be adding transactions within this screen. Normally you would add it on the statement within the property unit or the tenancy level. Okay, so once you've got the transactions that you want to remit, you can go ahead and select remit transactions, which will take you onto the second page. Okay, so in the second page, you're just going to choose the bank. So the bank here is not the bank account that you're paying into. It's the bank account, your bank account, that you're going to be paying out this money to the owner from. And this is particularly important for people that are integrated, because if you don't choose the right account, the right transaction won't appear in Xero or QuickBooks within the account that you need. So it's very important to choose the right bank account, especially for people that have their accounts integrated with Xero or QuickBooks. So you would choose the account that you're going to be paying out from, which would probably normally be your client's account. You can put the description by default always says property owner remittance, but you can change that if you want to. And then you would put your remittance date. So let's just say I'm going to choose today's date. Okay. And once that's done, we can then remit to the property owner. Okay, so now you can see Cloverfield Court is no longer a property showing within the remittance screen because I've remitted everything outstanding relating to that owner. And if we use another example here, so here, this is another example, but this time, the one that we've just done, we remitted by property. In this case here, this is a property owner with we can see he's got 3 properties, and we're going to remit the rent regarding all those 3 properties all together. Okay, so if I select transactions and remit, I can see the tenancy receipt of the 3 properties, so 12 Mayfair, Leicester Square, and Red Road. And I've also created management fees at the property level for each of his properties. So it's automatically calculated the management fee based on the receipts. Again, if I was to untick the tenancy receipt for Red Road, we can now see that the management fee for Red Road becomes 0. If I retick it, it has generated the auto-calculated the management fee. So that's why I think the setting up your management fees at Remittance is very useful rather than having single management fee transaction lines. So if it was a case where I didn't set it up at Remittance, I would see, just like I'm seeing transaction lines for the tenancy receipts, I'd also be seeing 3 transaction lines for the management fees. So it's a lot cleaner and a lot easier just having it basically calculating one lump sum, regardless of how many tenancy receipts that you have to be paid to the landlord. Okay, so once you confirm the amount, so the management fees, the payments minus the management fees, would give you your sum payable to the owner. Again, remit transactions. Okay, choose the bank account that the payment's going to come out from and choose your date. So I'm just going to choose today's date and I'm going to remit to the owner. Sorry, bear with me whilst it's just loading. Okay, so now you can see for that owner, that remittance, those properties and that owner has disappeared from the remittance grid because we've remitted everything relating to that owner. Okay, so once you've done your remittances, one thing to note is that doing these remittances is not going to make an actual bank transfer for you. You've now got the sum. You can go ahead and actually make that bank transfer. So once you've done your remittances, those remittances, you'll now be able to see them within the payments list. And within the payments list, you can print out statements for the owner and send it to them. So here, these are the 2 remittances that I did today. So here I've got the one that had several properties within it. And I've also got the first one that I did that was just a single unit property. Okay, so if I click print remittance, I'll be able to see the statement of that particular remittance that I've just done. And one thing to note is that you don't need to individually print your statement. So the print remittance is essentially not literally printing it. It's just the process by which it makes the statement into a PDF format. You can also batch print your statements for the owners. So using the tick boxes, you can do a batch print and you can also batch share. But I'm going to show you in particular just how the statements would look like. So I'm going to print this specific one. Okay, so the layout that you'd use would always be the property owner remittance statement, unless you have had a bespoke report statement, report format created for you. This is the default. Okay, so it's going to generate this statement for me. So here you would have your logo here, and you can see the breakdown of this particular remittance I've done to the landlord. So the management fee is the total sum is shown at the property level because I created the management fee at the property level, and I can see the rent within the specific property. So I can see the management fee for this particular property, and I can see the rent for that the tenant had paid. I can see a management fee for the second property again, and I can see the rent paid and so forth for the all the properties that you would be remitting at one time. You would see the management fee for the particular property and you'd see the rent. And this would be the breakdown for the owner. And then it gives you the total amount. So the total rent received, which is the tenancy receipts, and then the total management fee gives the sum that was paid out to the given owner. And we have a few formats in which the remittance statements can appear. So this is another format where it's divided by the money that has come in, so all the rent, and divided also by the money going out, so the management fee. So if you prefer this format, you can use this. And the last format, default format, is here. If you wanted it to be in a case where you just see the rent and you just see the management fee summary and the total amount paid. So, and then it goes into further detail about for which tenancies and the management fees for the properties. Okay, so those are the formats that we have for the property owner remittance statement, but this one, the first one I showed you, is normally the default format that it goes to. So that's what the statement would look like when you send it to the owner. So once you've done your remittances, you can either print a particular statement, and from here you can send it by email to the landlord, or you can batch print them all together. Okay, so yeah, so this is how you would send it to the owner, okay? And it would be an email with a PDF attached to it. Okay, or the other option is if you don't need to do it one by one, and let's say you've got a given day where you do all your remittances to your owner, or you've done multiple within a day, you can tick the remittances that you want, you can batch print it, and once you've batch printed it, you can then share via email. And again, that would be the email with the attachment. So you can either do it individually or you can do it as a batch, okay? And also CSV exports. This is mainly for, it would be for your internal use. So if you wanted to see a list of all the remittance amounts, all the remittances that you've made, you can have it go into a CSV export. That may be useful for you if you are doing a batch of payments through the bank and you just wanted to know all the different amounts that you need to pay. That would be pretty useful. And the last feature on this page is setting it as paid. So as I mentioned, doing the remittance in Arthur is not actually making the bank transfer to the landlord. It's only showing within Arthur that this has been paid and showing you the amount that you need to send out to the owner. So if you can see here, there's this remittance here is highlighted in green. So every time you set a remittance as paid, so let's say we set this one as paid here, it would be highlighted in green. So if I set that to pay, so now I can see that these two are highlighted in green, and then you can use the filters to be able to go between seeing your paid remittances. So once you've actually made the bank transfer, you can set it as paid. Again, you can use the batch feature to set multiple remittances as paid. And then you can also see the ones that you haven't quite made the payments for yet. So that's the payments list for you. It's essentially, you can see all your remittances, and then it's the area where you can make your send out your statements, print them, send them to the owner, and then actually set the specific remittances as paid. Okay, so I hope that was clear in terms of the whole process of doing your property owner remittances. Something that tends to happen is that using the wrong transaction type for setting up the recurring charge for your tenant. That's why I'm really emphasizing that it's really important to use rent charge, because if you don't use rent charge, you're not going to see those tenancy receipts at the property owner remittance to be able to pay out your landlords. Okay, and so that's the process of doing your property owner remittance. But there's also scenarios where, for example, you've not quite done the remittance correctly, or you've missed out a transaction, or you needed to add another transaction to the remittance. And in that case, you can actually undo your remittances. So there are several places where you can undo the remittance. So you can either do it within this payments list here, which will undo the remittance. When you undo it, it's not going to delete all the transactions within it's not going to delete all the transactions within the remittance that you've just done. It's just going to put it back to it being not remitted. So you would then see those transactions again at your in your property owner statement or in your remittance screen as ready to remit again, and you can add your transaction and then remit it again. So if I go to a particular property, so you can also undo it within your property. So if I go to let's close field. Okay, so if I go to the statement, and then I'd go to the property owner statement. That's where you would see all your property owner transactions. You can see here that you can see that a single line has now been made for the property owner remittance that I've just done of 850. And you can see here that you've got my tenancy receipt, my management fee, and disbursement charge. And notice that they no longer have outstanding balances because I've remitted them, that I've essentially paid out. And they also have the word remitted under the balance. And that's what happens every time you do a remittance. If you hadn't remitted it yet, it would just be a transaction sitting on the statement with an outstanding balance. So for example, as I said, that you can make one-off charges to your property owners as well. So let's say I just make a charge for the property owner. So let me just call this a one-off charge. Okay. So once I've saved that charge, I can see here that it has an outstanding balance here. It has an outstanding balance in relation to these transactions here that no longer have a balance because they've been remitted. So this will have an outstanding balance until I include it in whichever remittance I want to. So just showing you how you would undo the remittance. So if you undo the remittance, what's going to happen? All your transactions are going to stay, but they're going to go back to having an outstanding amount, and this property owner remittance line is going to be voided. So let's just use this one for example. So again, I'm coming into the property owner statement. You can only undo the remittance from the actual property owner remittance transaction. You can't undo the remittance from the disbursement charge or from the tenancy receipt. It has to be from the property owner remittance transaction. So I'm going to undo this now. So undo remittance, it's going to unallocate those transactions. Okay, so if I go back to the property owner statement, we can see here that those transactions here are no longer shown as remitted. They're now available for you to do another remittance. So if you want to do the remittance, including the charge that I've just created for the property owner, you can go ahead and now do the remittance all over again. Okay. So that's the process by which, if you've made a mistake and you need to undo, you can undo it here. If you're integrated to Xero or QuickBooks, you would have to also undo the remittance. If it's already synced through into those systems, you would have to undo the remittance there as well as undoing it in Arthur. So that's the overview of how you would do your property owner remittances, undoing them as well. Does anyone have any questions that I can show you through demonstration or I can explain to you? If so, you can just pop your question in the Q&A box. You should see it at the bottom or the top of your Zoom screen. Okay, there was a question that about the webinar being recorded. Yes, the webinar is going to be recorded. So okay, so how do you choose the different formats? In the format, when you go onto the payments list and you print any given remittance, so let's just print this one here. Okay, so by default, you would see whenever you print a specific property owner remittance, you would see the different formats that you have here. These formats are available for everyone. So if you wanted a particular format for a particular owner, then you can just pick whichever format it is and you can send it by email. By default, when you do the batch, it does default to this standard remittance statement that we have. So this is the standard format that we have. So when you do your batch print, it would be this format that it would print in. Okay, so in terms of getting your logo on the property owner statement, that's another question. You would need to white label your account. So within your account, you would have the area where you basically upload your logo. So okay, so if you go to company settings, you'd be able to personalize your account. So you can put your company logo, and then for your reports, so your reports show your logo, you would need to upload the file of your logo, and then that would then be able to be seen across any time you print any statement across Arthur. You'd be able to see your logo on the statement. Okay. Okay, so when you are integrated, whether Xero or QuickBooks, once you've done your remittance, a transaction will appear within Xero or QuickBooks, and you would be able to match that against the actual bank payment you've made in the bank. So for example, if I quickly show you in Xero, it would be the same process in QuickBooks as well. So okay, so you would have your bank feed both in Xero and QuickBooks. So your bank feed would show a spent item, the money that you've given to the landlord. And then once you've done your remittance in Arthur and it's synced through into Xero or QuickBooks, you'd have a transaction which you just match to the payment that you've made out from the bank. So it's as easy as just clicking OK. Same thing like what you do with invoices. You see the invoice from Arthur and then you see the money that's come in the bank and you match them. That's the same process that you use when you're doing your property owner remittances. You just match the transaction from Arthur with the payment that you've made out. So I hope that that answers that question. Okay, does anyone have any more questions regarding the property owner remittance? Okay, so
Thank you. Oh, yes, I'm going to see if I can put some.
So I'll just okay, so there's a question about shown on statement box. Please could you clarify that question for me? Where exactly are you seeing this shown on statement box? So if I go back to Arthur. Okay, when setting up the charge. So the question is, can I explain the shown on statement box when you're setting up the charge? And I'm guessing you're referring to the recurring charge. Okay, so if I go to a tenancy, okay, so if I go to recurring charge, if I was to add a new one, okay, so this shown on statement, this is basically the format by which you want it, you want the invoice to show on the tenant's rent statement. So for example, this is the default here. So this is going to be the description. So whatever you put here, it's going to show the tenant's name, the payee's name, it's going to show the tenancy number, and it's going to show the date range. So the date, the time frame by which the invoice is relating to. So that was the default. And you can choose a number of ways that you want it to be shown on the statement. So if I go back onto the statement for this given tenancy, you can see that this is the format that was selected, which was the default. So it shows the description of what it is, the tenant's name, the tenancy number, and the time frame by which that invoice is relating to. So that's the whole month. So you can choose whichever format that you would like. It just determines what is how you see it on the statement. So I hope that was clear in terms, I hope that's a bit clearer for you now in terms of what that shown on statement field means. So does anyone have any more questions in regards to anything relating to the property owner remittance? Or anything I need to run over again? Okay, so I don't think I've got any more questions coming in now. So thank you for attending this webinar. If you have any more questions in regards to property owner remittances, please drop us a message on the live chat. We also have knowledge-based articles in regards to if you want a visual guide in terms of how you would do the remittances and print that, so that can be found on our knowledge base as well. So thank you for attending, and I hope you all have a great day.